Thank you so much for joining us for CBN News Watch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly going ahead with a major decision to move in and take over all of the Gaza Strip, hoping to defeat Hamas, free the hostages, and make sure Gaza doesn't threaten Israel again. And we're going to hear from America's ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. He says countries calling for a Palestinian state and putting pressure on Israel are helping Hamas and harming the hostages. We're going to look at the deadly attack on a church in the state of Washington where a newlywed was killed at a church event. This comes after violent protests interrupted a worship gathering earlier this year. And we're going to hear from an expert on the impact of food companies taking artificial dyes out of their foods and the impact it could have on our health. All those stories and more right now on CBN News Watch.
This is CBN News Watch.
It's Tuesday, the 5th of August, going to begin this half hour in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly decided to take over all of the Gaza Strip. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, the decision means the Israeli Defense Forces would enter areas where Israel believes many of the remaining hostages are located.
Monday, Netanyahu announced he will convene his cabinet to give instruction to defeat Hamas and free the hostages.
We must continue to stand together and fight together to achieve the war goals we have set, all of them. The defeat of the enemy, the release of our hostages, and the assurance that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. Later this week, I will convene the cabinet to instruct the IDF on how to achieve these three goals, all of them, without exception.
Those three goals come in the midst of a battle between the U.S., Israel, and Hamas over who controls getting food to the people of Gaza. Friday, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee accompanied Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff to visit the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to report on the U.S.-Israeli-backed effort that's provided more than 100 million meals to hungry Gazans in the past 2 months.
The most important thing I saw was the efficiency of the GHF operation, which, by the way, Hamas hates. They said it was their second most important thing to get rid of if they're going to have a deal to let the hostages go. What does that tell you? It's working. And the people of Gaza actually get the food for free, and Hamas can't steal it.
Huckabee also talked to some of the people at the distribution site.
They don't want Hamas there anymore. They're sick of them. But they're also have no mood to have the PLO or Fatah or one of the other Palestinian organizations run Gaza in the future. So I think it's moving in the right direction. It's interesting that most of the Gulf states now recognize that, say that Hamas must disarm, let all the hostages go. Maybe we need to get that message to France, the UK, Canada, and Ireland.
All of those countries are calling for the establishment of a Palestinian state.
What I'd say to them is, you've given Hamas a wonderful gift. You've made it much easier for them to hold on to the hostages. Why don't you put the pressure on Hamas instead of Israel? Why don't you do something to help the hostages rather than hurt them? And why don't you do something to stand behind the country that was attacked rather than stand behind the people who did the attacking?
Huckabee's comments come after Hamas released video of emaciated Israeli hostage Eviatar David digging what he feared would be his own grave.
People want to see starvation in Gaza. Look at the hostages. That's who's being starved. And look how well-fed the Hamas members appear to be.
Huckabee also called out the international media for its reporting on what's happening inside Gaza.
The coverage has been deplorable, and the sad part is most of the information actually comes from Hamas. When they say that IDF soldiers are just mass shooting of innocent people coming to the feeding sites, that's a lie. They're the ones who are murdering people. They're murdering them who are getting food that they didn't have to pay for, and then they blame it on Israel. And the sad part is the international media just buys it hook, line, and sinker, reports it as truth, and they're perpetuating one of the biggest lies in all of history.
Given the challenges Israel is facing, Huckabee says people need to pray.
I hope people will recognize that Israel is in a very tough place. They need to pray that Israel can get this over with, but most importantly, pray that all the hostages come home. I think President Trump is on the right path when he says Hamas has to go. They have no future in Gaza, and I hope people will listen to the president.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Chris, we've talked to you recently about the possibility Israel will move to take over Gaza. Does it seem pretty much set in stone now that Netanyahu and his cabinet will go ahead with this plan?
It does seem pretty well set in stone right now, but we'll see later today when the Security Cabinet meets, Ephraim. From the reports we've heard so far, that it's going to go ahead. Apparently, however, the IDF Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, he opposes the move. Some of the reasons, or a couple of the reasons, would be the exhaustion of the army right now and also the danger to many of the hostages. Reportedly, a senior Israeli official is saying he can resign if he disagrees. But as I said, we're going to find out more later today when the Security Cabinet meets. But as Ambassador Huckabee said, it's a very important time to be praying for Israel right now. It's facing, huge challenges, international opposition in the media and by people, nations calling for a Palestinian state. So a very important time to be praying for Israel.
Has Israel now given up on the ceasefire talks and a settlement to get the hostages back?
Well, I don't think they've completely given up either Israel or the United States for that matter, but they see right now that Hamas is making unwilling to compromise and making demands that they really can't agree to. And a number of people believe, too, that the recent calls that Ambassador Huckabee referred to by nations like France, the UK, Canada, and Ireland have really convinced Hamas that they're winning the PR battle, and especially this campaign around the world that Israel is committing genocide within Gaza, or that they have a plan to starve the people of Gaza, while on the other hand they're putting in as much aid as either the UN or Hamas will allow. So if Hamas is making those excessive demands, later today there is planned a UN Security Council meeting. The foreign minister of Israel, Gideon Sa'ar, plans to speak at that, as well as the brother of Evyartar, David, who you saw in that video. He'll be speaking to the council virtually, and I'm sure talking about the kind of treatment that Hamas is giving to his brother there in the caves where he may be actually digging his own grave.
Any idea when this Israel military action would start?
Well, not sure exactly when that would happen, but Defense Minister Israel Katz is saying that he's formed his position that he's going to take to the Security Cabinet and the political steps that Israel will need to take to achieve the goals of the war. He's going to present that later today to Netanyahu and the cabinet. And those goals, as we've talked so many times, Ephraim, to defeat Hamas and provide conditions for the return of the hostages. Those are the central goals of the war. At the same time, Katz is saying they want to ensure the safety and security of Israeli communities around Gaza and actually establish a permanent presence there so that October 7th wouldn't happen any time again.
Chris, I have to ask about the downsides. Do Israel Defense Forces have concerns about going in with this action?
Well, they do. And as I mentioned already, they do have a couple of objections to this, to take over the whole Gaza Strip. They believe it'd take years to clear all of the infrastructure that Hamas has built over about 17 years, that it also puts the hostages in danger of being executed by their captives. That would include Hamas, maybe the clans or Islamic Jihad, in case the troops get close, that they would just simply be murdered. There is some reporting that there's been a divide within the Security Cabinet, with some ministers favoring an expansion of the operation to take over the entire Gaza Strip, but others favoring more time to try to get a ceasefire and free the hostages.
Ambassador Huckabee criticized major world media for one-sided coverage of the situation in Gaza. How does the Israeli government view the media's reporting?
Well, they consider the media war as important as the ground war, maybe even more important. They see it as fundamentally flawed, not just in what it reports, but also what it emits. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said that when the world's cameras turn on, only after Israel responds, they ignore what led to the response, and he calls it not journalism, but propaganda. So Israel contends that it's really held to standards that no other democracy at war faces. It's accused of genocide, even though it uses leaflets, what they call roof knocks, and alerts to the people of Gaza to get out of harm's way. And as well, they're blamed for a famine. On the other hand, they're enabling massive aid convoys into Gaza as well. So they know that it has a major impact, this international media, on politicians, which many believe led to the recent calls by many of those nations we talked about to a Palestinian state.
So what's ahead today on Jerusalem Dateline?
Well, we have analysis from CBN President Gordon Robertson. He's talking about the so-called two-state solution. We also have analysis with Gil Huffman. He's the head of Honest Reporting, and he's talking about how publications like the New York Times has been reporting on the recent calls for about starvation in Gaza. And also we have a story by CBN Israel helping out Israelis in time of need. And they're encouraging people, too, as Ambassador Huckabee said, to be praying for Israel for such a time as this when it's in a very, very difficult situation.
Indeed. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you for your insights. Looking forward to joining you again in the days ahead. Want to remind you at home that you can get the latest from Jerusalem Dateline at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can find it on the CBN News channel. You can also watch it on the CBN News app, or you can find it on YouTube. Organizers of a worship event in May invaded by violent protesters say they will keep up their work of spreading the gospel. We're going to show you what happened and what's being done to protect religious freedom in America. We got this story for you when we come back. You're watching CBN News Watch. Seattle police are searching for a suspect who reportedly shot and killed a 28-year-old man as he arrived with his family at a barbecue and young adult service at Pursuit Church, which is near the University of Washington. An estimated 30 rounds of bullets were shot into the crowd gathering in the parking lot for the event. You can find the full story at cbnnews.com. Earlier this year, a Seattle Christian worship event was invaded by violent protesters, but organizers say it will not stop them from spreading the gospel. And religious liberty attorneys and the FBI have to investigate the city's security and response. Our Paul Petit has this story.
Armed with urine-filled water balloons and shouting obscenities, an angry mob stormed through the barricades to disrupt Seattle's May Day USA Christian rally.
People from our church got physically beaten by radical leftists.
Seattle police arrested 23 protesters. Children in attendance witnessed the violence.
They started performing sexually lewd acts directly in front of the children, targeting them.
The Seattle mayor's response sparked further outrage, blaming the Christian organizers, calling the rally anti-trans and anti-gay.
I don't think the mayor would have said anything had this been a different organization. If this was a Muslim rally or a Buddhist rally or an LGBTQIA plus rally.
The ministers on stage during the chaos are working with federal officials and attorneys to hold city leaders accountable.
Those wheels are spinning. Those legal actions are underway. Those investigations are happening. Now we have to let it play out.
The FBI is also involved, with Deputy Director Dan Bongino posting on X, quote, "Freedom of religion isn't a suggestion." Just days later, after the event, Los Angeles denied a permit for the group's final May Day USA rally.
They decided to give a permit to the Pride Festival, the LGBTQ community, for the same street the following weekend, but told us no.
Shut up by the city, Ross and his team decided to take matters into their own hands. They shut down this portion of Hollywood Boulevard and began to exercise what they call their First Amendment rights by preaching, worshiping, and baptizing.
When I think of Peter, Paul, Jesus, heavy hitters in the Bible, right? All of their lives, they faced persecution. They ran up against political powers. They ran up against principalities, but they never backed down.
Christians all over the nation are being attacked, persecuted for their beliefs, and because they won't bow the knee to the popular ideology.
Their support from the White House, and during the new Religious Liberty Commission's first meeting, Attorney General Pam Bondi promised to root out anti-Christian bias.
This president and this administration are fully committed to restoring and defending religious liberty for all Americans.
This is definitely the direction we want to go in. Of course, you can't eliminate or eradicate the hate for Jesus Christ in the hearts of people, but you can make it so the government understands that it's not allowed to take part in that kind of hostility.
First Liberty Institute released how each state ranks on religious freedom protections. Florida ranked first, while California landing near the bottom at 43. Washington State, despite the Seattle controversy, ranked 8th.
There might be some states where they have actually pretty decent laws. They don't have great leaders, so they're not defending and upholding those laws.
Their aim is for the index to pressure states to enforce the First Amendment. And if city leaders don't, groups like First Liberty want federal funding cut while lawsuits proceed.
They understand that language, and I think their taxpayers do too. And ultimately, they have to pay the consequences for their religious hostility, and I think that's the way you got to do it.
That's exactly the approach Pastor Johnson and Evangelist Johnston say they'll keep taking.
We're going to stand. We're not going to be pushed around. We're not going to be publicly chided. We're not going to get beat up in a park and then just roll over and take it. There should be a political, a legal, a civil, a financial, a political consequence for people who operate like this. And we intend to exact that on the leaders who allowed this to happen in the city of Seattle.
Paul Petit, CBN News.
Still ahead, an expert talks to CBN News about the news of a growing number of food companies saying they're going to remove artificial dyes from their foods and what it could mean for your health. We've got the story when we come back. Welcome back to CBN News Watch. More food manufacturers are promising to remove artificial food dyes from their foods. It's all part of the so-called MAHA movement to make America healthy again, led by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. On this week's Healthy Living Show, nutrition expert Dr. Stephen Gundry weighs in on how this is important when it comes to our overall health.
Part of the problem with just saying, okay, well, we're now going to get these food dyes out of our food, the law doesn't go into effect for another 2 years. And if it was that much of an emergency, it should have been done today. Why isn't it being done today? Because what we're really doing with this is a magician's trick. It's look over there, and these food dyes are the troublemaker when, in fact, the actual trouble is in these processed foods themselves.
Do you think a lot of consumers, because, these food manufacturers are going to put in great big letters, no artificial dyes, and consumers are going to be like, oh, great, now this is healthy. I guess I'll buy it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, we've seen this so many times with big food companies that when trans fats were the evil empire, they went to extensive lengths to change food labels to still hide the trans fats because they would reduce serving size to a point where the government would say, okay, if there's this amount of trans fats per serving size, then you don't have to put it on the label. And so people would just put the serving size down so that they didn't have to put the trans fats there, but they were still there. We've gone through the no added fat, the no added sugar, and we all know how that's come. So it's just moving the needle to distract attention to the actual problem, and that's processed foods in general.
So talk about what's wrong with processed foods, even if we have the natural food colors.
So I'll give you a great example from a patient this week. And this is a very alert consumer, eats all organic, wants to do everything right, and yet she's a diabetic, and she's eating healthy organic fruit, as an example, and making fruit smoothies. And yet her diabetic numbers keep getting worse and worse. And she says, how can that be? I'm eating healthy organic fruit, and fruit is nature's, food for us. Well, it's basically sugar, and she makes them into smoothies. And when we pulverize fruit, we are able to absorb those sugars even faster. Thinking that you're doing something healthy and having companies tell you you're doing something healthy doesn't really move the needle at all. As I tell my patients, our great-great-grandparents ate whole foods, and they ate those foods whole. There wasn't any processing of any food into a simpler food. Whenever we grind up whole things, we make them readily absorbable as sugars or amino acids or fatty acids, and that destroys how our digestive system and how we process these foods happens. And that's why, you look at pictures of people in the 30s or 40s or 50s, even 60s, they ate huge amounts of calories, but they were all skinny. And we eat the less calories than they did. We exercise far more than they did, and we're all fat.
And you can learn other keys to a proper diet on this week's edition of Healthy Living Today on the CBN News Channel. You can find it at 2:30 and 8:30 Eastern. You can also see it on the CBN News app. You can find it on YouTube as well. We're coming back with an encouraging word for your day. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for your Tuesday Tweetable. This is a message I pray encourages you, and I invite you to post, tag, tweet, and share this with those in your circles of influence. Know this: when you put everything in God's hands, you will see God's hands in everything. God is concerned about everything that concerns you. He only needs your invitation. Today is a great day to open the door and let Him in to every situation. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. You can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye. God bless.